Anika had been working at St. Joseph's Hospital in Vancouver for 7 years
Who are
without
they here
anyone
for?
knowing that she was engaged to one of Canada's most dangerous organized crime figures.
Who made
She
my
was
fiancé
34,
cry?
had worked her way through nursing school while raising her younger sister after their mother had died, had built a reputation at the hospital as one of the most competent and compassionate nurses on staff. She worked double shifts regularly, volunteered for the difficult cases, helped other nurses with their workloads. She was so thoroughly integrated into the hospital that people forgot she had a life outside these walls, a life that included a fiancé who managed criminal operations across British Columbia and into the American Pacific Northwest. His name was Fiancée, and he was 42, had spent 20 years building himself from street-level dealer to boss of one of Vancouver's most powerful organized crime syndicates. He controlled cocaine trafficking, money laundering, protection rackets across the city. He was the kind of man who could make other powerful men nervous simply by entering a room. They had met in a way that neither of them had planned. At a hospital emergency room 7 years earlier, when Fiancée had arrived with a gunshot wound that required emergency surgery and absolute discretion about how he had received it. Anika had been the nurse assigned to his case. She had treated him with the same competence and compassion she brought to all her patients, without acknowledging anything about his background or his connections, without performing fear or intimidation in response to the security personnel who had accompanied him. She had simply done her job, monitoring his vitals, managing his pain, ensuring he received the quality of care that his condition required. He had been fascinated by her, not because she was beautiful, though she was. She had caramel skin and natural hair and an elegant bearing that she somehow maintained even during the most difficult shifts, but because she was utterly unimpressed by him. She did not know who he was, did not care about his power, did not treat him any differently than she treated any other patient. When he had recovered enough to leave the hospital, he had arranged to see her again. Not in a way that was obvious or that compromised her job. He had simply shown up at the coffee shop where she got her coffee before starting her shift, had begun a conversation, had somehow managed to be present in her life, without being intrusive. It had taken months for her to even understand who he was. She had thought he was just a businessman with flexible schedule and significant resources. By the time she had discovered the truth about his background, she had already fallen in love with him, with his intelligence, with his dark sense of humor, with the way he treated her like she was the most important person in his world. She had tried to leave him when she discovered what he actually did. This is not a life I can be part of. I cannot be married to someone who exploits people, who causes violence, who profits from suffering. But he had been persistent in ways that were not controlling but were genuinely compelling. I am not asking you to participate in my business. I am asking you to let me love you. I am asking you to let me be part of your life. My business and my personal life can remain completely separate. You do not have to know anything about what I do except that I do it to build resources so that I can support you, can protect you, can give you the kind of life that someone like you deserves. She had resisted for 2 years, but gradually, she had realized that she was in love with him in a way that transcended her moral objections to his business. She had realized that she was capable of accepting him as a complex person, someone who caused harm through his work, but someone who also treated her with genuine respect and who was willing to change aspects of his operations specifically to minimize the harm that made her uncomfortable. He had pulled back from the most violent operations. He had shifted his organization's focus toward the less destructive aspects of organized crime. He had made changes that no law enforcement pressure had ever motivated him to make, simply because she had asked him to. And she had eventually accepted his proposal. They had a small, secret wedding, just close friends and family, no public announcement. They had rented a beautiful house in the suburbs, away from the city center where his organization operated. They had built a private life that existed completely separate from his criminal enterprise. To everyone at the hospital, Anika was simply a single woman who worked hard and who somehow managed to be consistently present and competent despite never seeming to have a personal life. None of her colleagues knew that she was married. None of them knew that she spent her evenings with a powerful organized crime figure. None of them knew that she was now 7 months pregnant with his child. She had kept the pregnancy private from the hospital as long as she could, but now it was impossible to hide. Her belly was visibly pregnant under her scrubs. She was experiencing the physical changes that came with carrying a child. She could not work double shifts anymore. She was managing single shifts with some difficulty, her back aching, her energy diminished by the demands of her job and her pregnancy. Her colleagues had started asking questions. "Are you okay? You seem like you are struggling more than usual. Just tired. Pregnancy is exhausting. Where is the father? Is he supportive?" She had given vague answers, had maintained her privacy, had not revealed anything about Fiancée or about her actual life outside the hospital. But maintaining the secret had become increasingly difficult. Fiancée wanted to be present for the pregnancy. He wanted to attend doctor's appointments. He wanted to be involved in preparing for their child's birth. He wanted to tell the world that Anika was his wife, that the child she was carrying was his child, that she belonged to him in ways that made their relationship public rather than secret. She had resisted. Your world and my world cannot collide. The moment people at the hospital know who you are, everything changes. I become the organized crime boss's wife instead of a nurse. My credibility is destroyed. My career is compromised. I lose the autonomy that I have fought very hard to maintain. I understand what you are afraid of. But you cannot hide this pregnancy forever. Eventually, people will know. Eventually, you'll have to decide whether you are ashamed of being married to me or whether you are willing to acknowledge our relationship publicly. The question had haunted her for months. She was not ashamed of loving him. She was not ashamed of being his wife. But she was afraid of what his public presence would do to her professional identity, to her reputation at the hospital, to her ability to do her job without being defined first and foremost as the wife of a mafia boss. She had decided that she would maintain her secret as long as possible. She would give birth. She would return to work. She would figure out how to balance her marriage and her career without either one consuming the other. That plan had collapsed the day Fiancée decided that the secret had been kept long enough. It was a Tuesday afternoon in November. Anika was working the afternoon shift, was stationed in the women's health unit, where she was overseeing several pregnant patients and providing post-delivery care. She was wearing her maternity scrubs, her pregnancy now obvious to everyone who saw her, her belly moving visibly with the movements of the child she was carrying. She was checking on a post-delivery patient when one of her colleagues approached her with an expression of confusion mixed with barely concealed excitement. "Anika, there are a lot of SUVs in the parking lot. Like a lot of them. All black. All arriving at the same time. And there are men in suits getting out of them. A lot of men. I think something is happening. Maybe a celebrity. Maybe a politician." Anika had felt her heart rate increase. She had moved to the window to look down at the parking lot. 10 black luxury SUVs were arranged in perfect formation. Men in suits were emerging from them, security personnel, clearly, their movements coordinated and professional. And from the lead vehicle, Fiancée was emerging in an immaculate black tailored suit, his presence commanding immediate attention from everyone in the vicinity. He was walking toward the hospital entrance with absolute authority, with the bearing of someone who was completely certain of his position and his right to be wherever he was. "Oh my God, who is that?" her colleague whispered. Anika had no words. She had known this moment was coming eventually. Fiancée had warned her. But she had not believed he would actually do it, would actually arrive at her workplace with such an obvious display of power, would actually force her to choose between her secret and her public identity. He was in the lobby now. He was asking someone for directions. He was being told where the women's health unit was. He was heading for the elevators. "Anika, do you know what is happening?" her colleague asked. "Yes," she said quietly. "I think I do." When Fiancée arrived at the women's health unit, the entire floor seemed to pause. The security personnel who had accompanied him took positions at the entrance. The other staff members stared. And Fiancée walked directly to where Anika was standing, took her hand, placed one palm on her pregnant belly with a tenderness that contradicted his overall demeanor, and kissed her. It was not a romantic gesture designed for public consumption. It was a clear claim: I am claiming her as mine. I am claiming this child as mine. I am refusing to allow this relationship to remain secret anymore. The room was completely silent. "I am Fiancée Park," he said, his voice carrying across the entire unit. "I am married to Anika. We are expecting a child together in approximately 6 weeks. I have come to inform everyone that she will be taking a medical leave of absence in preparation for childbirth, and she will not be returning to this job after that leave. She will be staying home with our child. She will have every resource she needs to make that transition comfortably. Anika felt something inside her break. Not because he had revealed their secret, but because he had made a decision about her career without consulting her first. That was not your decision to make, she said quietly. But Kyung-seo was already turning to leave, already confident that he had accomplished what he came to do, already certain that his assertion of power had resolved the situation according to his preferences. She watched him walk away, watched the security personnel follow him, watched the 10 SUVs pull out of the parking lot in synchronized formation, and she understood that despite 7 years of believing she could keep her 2 lives separate, despite genuinely believing that she could maintain her nursing career while being married to a mafia boss, the moment of reckoning had arrived. She finished her shift in a state of shock. Her colleagues asked dozens of questions, all of which she declined to answer fully. She confirmed that yes, she was married, yes, the man who had just announced it was her husband, yes, the child was his. She provided no other information. When she got home that evening, she found Kyung-seo waiting for her in their house, with flowers and with an expression that suggested he believed he had done something romantic rather than something that had violated her agency and her autonomy. "Why did you do that?" she asked him. "Because I am tired of hiding. Because I am tired of you pretending that you do not belong to me. Because I wanted everyone to know that you are my wife, that this child is my child, that you are not alone in this pregnancy. You made a decision about my career without asking me. You announced that I would be staying home without consulting me about whether that was what I wanted to do. Is it not what you want? Do you not want to be home with our child? That is not the point. The point is that you made a decision that affects my entire future without giving me any say in it." She realized then what the fundamental problem had always been. Despite Kyung-seo's willingness to modify his business practices, despite his genuine love for her, despite his commitment to their relationship, he still fundamentally believed that his will superseded hers, that his needs and his desires were more important than her autonomy, that she was his to decide about, his to make choices for. "I cannot do this," she said. "I cannot be married to someone who loves me but who does not actually respect my agency, who makes decisions about my life without consulting me, who reveals my secrets without permission. Anika, I came to the hospital because I was tired of hiding, because I love you, and I wanted to claim you publicly. You came to the hospital because you wanted to assert your power. You wanted to show me and everyone else that I belong to you. You wanted to control the narrative about my pregnancy and my life. That is not love. That is possession." She packed a bag that night. She did not leave him permanently. She was not ready for that, and the pregnancy made such decisions complicated. But she moved out temporarily, moved in with a friend, needed physical and emotional space to process what had happened. Kyung-seo tried to convince her to come home. He sent flowers. He sent gifts. He tried to explain that he had only been trying to show his commitment to her. But Anika had had a realization while sitting in her friend's apartment, with her hand on her pregnant belly, processing the moment when her secret had been revealed without her consent. She could not raise a child with someone who believed that love meant control. She could not teach her daughter or son that it was acceptable to let someone else make decisions about their life in the name of love. She could not model a relationship in which autonomy was sacrificed for commitment. 3 weeks before her due date, she gave Kyung-seo an ultimatum. "I will return home after I give birth. I will raise this child with you. But things have to change. You have to accept that I am an autonomous person with agency and with rights. You have to consult me about major decisions. You have to respect my choices even when they are different from what you would choose. And you have to understand that love without respect is just control. I can do that. I can change. You said that before. And then you arrived at my hospital with 10 SUVs and announced major decisions about my career without asking me. You have to actually demonstrate change, not just promise it." She had given birth 2 weeks later, a beautiful daughter who had Anika's skin and Kyung-seo's eyes. The experience of motherhood had transformed something in both of them. Kyung-seo had watched Anika labor, had watched her give birth, had witnessed the absolute commitment required of her to bring their child into the world. And he had understood, perhaps for the first time, that she was not someone he owned but someone he was privileged to share his life with. She had tried to return to work 3 months after giving birth, but the hospital dynamics had changed completely. She was no longer just the hardworking nurse. She was now the nurse married to an organized crime figure. Colleagues treated her differently. Patients looked at her differently. The confidentiality and the separation between her professional identity and her personal life had been permanently destroyed. She had made the decision to leave her job, not because Fiancée had announced that she should, but because the environment had become untenable. The secret that she had worked so hard to maintain had been shattered, and with it, her ability to function as an autonomous professional in that setting. Over the following years, Fiancée had made significant changes to his life and his organization. Not because Anika had demanded it, but because he had genuinely come to understand that loving someone meant respecting their autonomy, which meant modeling autonomy in his own decisions. He had begun the process of stepping back from his most violent operations. He had reduced his direct involvement in criminal activity. He had shifted his organization toward less destructive enterprise. And he had become a present, involved father, not in the way that demonstrated his ownership of his children, but in the way that showed his commitment to being part of their lives while respecting their independence and their right to make their own choices. 5 years after arriving at the hospital with 10 SUVs, Fiancée had essentially completely extracted himself from organized crime. He had legitimate business interests, a stable family, a life that was genuinely different from the one he had built in his first 4 decades. Anika had not returned to nursing full-time, but she had found work that allowed her to balance career and motherhood. Consulting on healthcare equity, working with hospitals on improving patient care for vulnerable populations, using her nursing knowledge in ways that did not require her to be in a clinical setting. She had also become vocal about her experience, writing articles and giving talks about the importance of autonomy in relationships, about the difference between love and control, about how even people motivated by genuine affection can fall into patterns of possession. The moment my husband arrived at my hospital with 10 SUVs and announced decisions about my life, I understood that I had to make a choice, she said in an interview. I could either accept that love meant losing my autonomy, or I could insist that love meant respecting my agency. I chose the second option, and it required my husband to genuinely transform, not to just say he would change, but to actually demonstrate change through consistent action. 10 years after the SUVs arrived at St. Joseph's Hospital, Fiancée was speaking at a conference about organized crime rehabilitation and the importance of relationships in motivating change. I came to my wife's hospital to claim her. I was motivated by love, but I expressed it through control. The moment I did that, I lost her temporarily, and I was forced to understand what I had been doing wrong. I loved her, but I did not respect her autonomy. I wanted to build a life with her, but I was trying to build it on my terms rather than on terms we agreed to together. He paused, looking out at the audience. The most significant transformation of my life was not leaving organized crime. It was learning to love someone without trying to control them. It was learning that respecting someone's agency is more important than asserting my own power. It was learning that the greatest strength I could demonstrate was the willingness to let someone I loved make choices that were different from what I would choose. Anika, sitting in the audience, understood that her husband had genuinely changed. Not because she had forced him to, but because he had finally understood what was at stake. Their children were watching to see what kind of relationship was acceptable, what kind of love looked like, what autonomy meant in action. She had made the choice 7 years ago to reveal her marriage publicly through an act of control. It had taken years to rebuild the relationship on a foundation of genuine respect rather than possession. But they had done it. And in doing it, they had created a family in which autonomy was valued, in which love meant respecting the other person's right to make their own choices, in which power was understood not as the ability to control others, but as the ability to choose differently.